NFL Week 18 is over, the regular season over, and Wild Card Weekend is upon us. So let's take a first look at Wild Card Weekend, the betting markets, everything we need to know, the brackets, of course, things that are going to help us out in the world of DFS and playoff best ball as we do that stuff throughout the course of this week. And let's start it off here. Well, of course, we'll talk about some overviews. And really, the biggest takeaway for me from yesterday is like some really serious injuries that are going to affect certainly some playoff best ball teams where I felt pretty good getting some Detroit Lions. Sam Laporta got banged up pretty bad, hyperextended knee for him. Doesn't seem like he'll be playing in the wild card round, might be out for a few weeks even. So that's one. It's a big one. AJ Brown, of course, getting hurt as well. An ACL injury, never a report you want to see. His ACL is intact. Like, yes, great news, his ACL is intact, but the fact that they thought it was an ACL injury, not a great sign for AJ Brown. Jalen Hurts, his finger was going all over the place yesterday. That's not a thing we want to see. So lots to talk about here as it relates to just the guys that are now meaningfully affected. And that doesn't even include stuff like Jacksonville, of course, a team that we debated very vigorously last week. Was it a colossal disappointment for the Jags to not make the playoffs after having a 99% probability to make the playoffs just a few short weeks ago? I think the definitive answer is yes. Of course, they get themselves eliminated in a game against Tennessee yesterday. But let's talk about it here. I see the chat going. We got Mr. in here. We got Robert Griffin III. Spags rolling a blunt. No, Spags doing work. It's what he was doing. Of course, getting ready to prep for this stream, getting ready for the stuff I'm doing it probably as well. And GM Squirts, our guy Bindles is here. Feels good about it. But feeling not good about this one. Charles here after the first week of football, or this week of football rather. Not excited about my Philadelphia shares in playoff best ball. Philadelphia, man. We watched the game in the house yesterday. Of course, my wife, Alex, big Eagles fan. We live outside the Philadelphia area because this is where she grew up. Grew up in Cherry Hill on the Jersey side of Philly, which is odd to say. It's a different state, but they consider themselves basically to be a part of Philly. And it's really was an awful game yesterday where they threw in that towel very quickly. Of course, the Cowboys went full go against the Commanders, put up a lot of points. Philadelphia is definitely a team where I think if you're drafting them in playoff best ball this week, you're probably on an island because I have to imagine not a lot of people want to draft them. Even the betting markets, which we're going to look at in a moment here, really not the highest totals for Philadelphia in that game. They're only a 2.5-point favorite at Tampa Bay. Of course, early in the year, a matchup against the Niners for Tampa Bay, a gigantic dog. We're Tampa Bay in that spot. The Niners were a team that we thought were basically 1-1 with the Philadelphia Eagles throughout the course of a year. So a tough spot. Before we get into this before we even look at the betting markets, I'm going to give my predictions up top because I think that with the way this laid out, we kind of have a read on how these games are going to go. Of course, Houston makes the playoffs. I have to give our full shout out to our guy, Raise It in the chat, who I think 3 weeks ago when CJ Stroud was still with concussions and guys like me, I know that people in the industry as well were worried about CJ Stroud even getting back in. Stroud makes it back in. Stroud, of course, is a great game. Some really amazing deep targets, of course, the type of football I like to see played. I was feeding Nico Collins in that game versus the Colts. Texas squeezed out that one, of course. Wasn't even a game where they really ran away with, but the offensive performance in that game really makes you think that they could throw themselves into any game. They're facing Cleveland, though, so if you are a Joe Flacco backer, it does feel like Cleveland advancing is in play as well. If I had to make a pick from this first game, we'll go game by game here to give my picks before we even dive in. Of course, this is top of the head picks based on the stuff that I've talked about all year, the stuff that I've observed all year. I think Cleveland wins this one. I obviously, we've talked a lot about the Joe Flacco stacks, people getting a little bit too enthusiastic for them throughout the course of a year. This is probably the best matchup as well for Cleveland in this spot. So I think that for this situation for Cleveland, facing a team like Houston that has to throw the ball, going to have to drop back a lot of times, Cleveland is going to get pressure on CJ Stroud, make it very tough. Of course, Stroud is so talented. Stroud is so able, of course, we've talked about it since January of last year, able to add value, passing the ball at every level of the field, under 10 yards, over 10 yards, over 20 air yards. That's the kind of player that CJ Stroud is. But against Cleveland, he's going to have to do more than he's ever had to do. So if I were really making a bet here, if I were making a bet on playoff best ball, well, relative to price points, I think Houston is still in play for sure. If you are like drafting a team, you take Texans, you're making a bet they beat Cleveland, you're probably making a bet they can make it to the AFC title game. But for Cleveland, I think they landed the best possible matchup for themselves. Facing a rookie QB, it's going to have a really hard time with that defense. Defense got some good rest this past weekend. Of course, Cleveland did not look like themselves with all the guys they had missing in that game. But Cleveland, I think, wins this one against Houston, even though I personally do love Houston a lot more, just the way they play. Got to hope Cleveland and Houston and LAR Detroit is the Saturday slate. I think we already have that in the books. It is Cleveland and Houston and Miami, Kansas City on Saturday. On Sunday, Pittsburgh, Buffalo, Green Bay, Dallas. And then Rams, Detroit closes out. Of course, Matthew Stafford returning to Detroit. Game that looked like it wasn't going to happen based upon the seedings, but then things move around. The Eagles didn't try. Now we have the Rams heading to Detroit. And on Monday Night Football, Philadelphia, Tampa Bay. So that schedule is out, and that's what the schedule is going to be. This one from our guy Jason here. DFS sucked, but I 4X'd my investment on Probably yesterday. Got to get in there, fellas. Shout out to Jason. I do agree here. Of course, use 50% off promo code SPLASH to save yourself that 50% on Probably. Of course, that means getting all of our pregame data for under $10, all of our live in-game data, which Jason has also picked up as part of our Probably package. Get all that for under $25. But check it out again. I got slaughtered in DFS, like absolutely slaughtered this week, which gave away. I'll tell you guys, just be real with it. Gave away almost $1,000 of the $3,000 I had in best ball winnings. So did not feel good. And I think, especially in a week where, of course, our pal Pete Overzet, a lot of people around the industry following his lead, talking about cash games. I did not fare well in large field GPPs. And I think the biggest takeaway, which you can remind me of next week in week 18, Joe Mixon going off, a bit of a surprise. But I think really playing the vets who had a guaranteed role worked better than playing even the David Bells of the world who just didn't have enough ownership to matter. David Bell was a great play, had a good amount of shares of him, along with Jeff Driscoll. But that didn't really matter towards my portfolio because we just didn't get there at the running backs. Jordan Mason disaster with Eli Mitchell getting the early work in that game. I'm trusting just the guys that are getting meaningful work. And frankly, guys are just playing for themselves. Like Joe Mixon was celebrating as hard as if the Bengals had made the Super Bowl with how he'd gotten his touchdowns early in that game. Was doing the raining money on people kind of celebration after he got his second touchdown, meaning he made $100,000 for himself. And granted, it is Joe Mixon. He can find himself in a legal situation and have to pay out that $100,000 a lot faster than other guys in the league will. But just really a weird slate for sure. And really none of the guys who were young, exciting guys got off in a meaningful way. Besides, I guess, our boy Kendra Miller finally doing it in week 18. So besides that, we got Cleveland and Houston. Again, I'm picking Cleveland here. The other Saturday night game, Miami versus Kansas City. I think I'd take Miami in the spot. Obviously, it would be nice to see Mostert full go. It'd be nice to see also Jalen Waddle, who missed Sunday night as well, be full go. They fed Durham Smythe more than they have. Definitely fed some players that you're not normally expecting them to feed. Running back touches were carved up pretty well as well. Devon Achane not getting a full bell cow role in that game versus Buffalo yesterday. But I think with what Kansas City has shown us, the defense obviously has been pretty good on the year. Maybe some time off to clear their heads. Obviously getting this week off, not getting a bye, but certainly basically like a bye for them. I feel for Kansas City, you could maybe hope to see the best version of themselves, but I'd rather place a bet on Miami here. I think Miami and Cleveland advancing is a lot more fun here. Of course, that would make it more likely that Miami goes to Baltimore next week, and I don't think that'll go well for them. But Miami has a 6th seed. I think let's put them ahead of Kansas City here. That'd be my 2 picks so far. Cleveland over Houston, Miami versus Kansas City. See, Pittsburgh versus Buffalo, the other AFC game. I think Buffalo's got to win this one. Pittsburgh wouldn't shock me to see an upset, I guess, just given the fact that Buffalo, a much different team than they were earlier in this year, running the ball so much over the course of the last month since Joe Brady took over as offensive coordinator. But also even in winter go home kind of spots like yesterday, we saw over 15 rushes for Josh Allen, just under 15 for James Cook. So I feel like in the spot, I think that Buffalo does a lot of things that certainly leave them more prone to a team like Pittsburgh hanging in, but also, more diversified offensive attack. They're not just feeding Diggs. We saw Khalil Shakir lead the Bills in overall offensive production yesterday at receiver. We also saw Dawson Knox get involved. Dalton Kincaid was also involved. Gabe Davis was not involved, so obviously that's the push-pull of it all. But I would say for Buffalo and Pittsburgh, I think Pittsburgh is capable of winning that game. I just think that Buffalo, and what a twist, by the way, that Buffalo ended up being the 2 seed. How badly they played all year, how close it looked like, where they could have potentially been eliminated yesterday. They end up in the 2 seed. A really wild kind of turn of events for them. But I think Buffalo's a much better team. I wouldn't hate playing a Pittsburgh upset. But Pittsburgh, though, pretty big dogs in the spot. I believe they're 10-point dogs. Excuse me. I thought they were 7 and change. No, 10-point dogs hanging into Buffalo. I would bet Buffalo and feel pretty confident about that and would think that Buffalo then gets a home game in the second round. And then Buffalo, I guess, versus Cleveland would be the pick for round 2. So I think if you're playing playoff best ball, to me, that's the route I would try to take where, I guess if you're playing Kansas City, there's a lot of optionality you have for playoff best ball where if you wanted to play Kansas City, obviously then Kansas City would be potentially getting either a road game or at Buffalo in the second round, or playing a home game against whoever would make it besides the other teams in the second round as well. There's a lot of ways to get unique with Kansas City in playoff best ball, even though I don't have a lot of faith in them. So still a valid team to take, but I think the more fun route to be would be Cleveland, Miami, Buffalo advancing, and that's the one that I think personally will happen for sure. White out for Pittsburgh is just massive. It is massive, but again, one player I will say, harkening back to Football Outsiders, whatever I've want to critique about them and some of the stuff I learned, and frankly, some of the processes that I didn't find as impressive, even compared to DFS processes and projections and all of that. I would say that one thing that always stood out to me for DVOA in particular, if a star defensive player goes out, for the most part, they don't change things. Whereas if a star QB goes out, they do downgrade the offensive DVOA. I'm sure Aaron Schatz's doing the same thing because he's been doing the same thing for 20 years. So I would say that's probably still the the case as well with the current numbers. But I think that's something where defensive players, for the most part, don't get an adjustment. So Watt obviously matters, but a scheme matters a lot more. The 10 other guys around the one player matter a lot more. So I wouldn't think that changes the matchup. Pittsburgh is still Pittsburgh, but obviously it's never great to lose one of your star players for sure. Based on my suggested path, Cleveland is live for the AFC Championship game. I mean, I would say they're live. They just have to beat Buffalo, which we know they can do. Certainly the talent has been there for them on the year defensively, offensively too. Should be able to make something happen against the Bills D that's looked a little better over the last month, but still definitely not a good defense. So I think the path is there for Cleveland. I think Baltimore and Cleveland playing that as your two AFC teams in playoff best ball would probably be my preferred way to play it. But again, like CJ Stroud could throw themselves into that upset too. So like, I don't really want to say like, these are my takes. I think it's Cleveland. I think it's Miami. I think it's Buffalo, but you can really play into these outcomes. And I think they're all completely justifiable because of the fact that this is really a flat playoff besides Baltimore, who I think we expect to probably steamroll anybody they come up against. And then the title game, we'll see what happens. It's going to be anybody's ball game by then. Chubb seemed to be a major blow for Miami, yes, but has their defense really been that different? I don't think it has. So I think it kind of speaks to what we're talking about there, but that's at least from what I've observed from, again, some of the people that are regarded as the highest, most advanced analytics sound people in the industry and people at Football Outsiders. So let's talk about the NFC side of things here. Of course, the Niners have the bye, so no risk for them. Philadelphia going the wrong way. Tampa Bay also kind of a limp showing, 9-0 win versus Carolina in that spot. You can talk me to either side here. Philadelphia winning, but being a skeleton crew is kind of an interesting thing for best ball because I guess we would expect A.J. Brown to be back in at some point, but Julio Jones might functionally be the wide receiver one next week because Devontae Smith still banged up with that high ankle sprain. He might be able to go, was walking around with that limp in the locker room earlier this week. But I think I would still take Philadelphia in the spot. I think people are going to be very down on them. I think they should be down on them. Philadelphia has not looked like themselves throughout any point of this year. And that's something that I've warned about. Just looking at the advanced analytics where Jalen Hurts, how many times did I warn you guys about throughout the first 4 weeks of the year? Like, hey, Jalen Hurts is getting the results. He's still technically the best QB in football, according to my rankings, because of the work he gets, the fact that he's running 10 times a game, throwing deep X amount of times per game. But the effectiveness has not been there basically since the beginning of the year. Kind of leveled out at one point, but it just hasn't been there on the offense. Now, defensively, it's also getting worse. They're also sack totals are greatly behind where they were last year. Takeaways greatly behind where they were last year. So like there's definitely blood in the streets of Philadelphia. You know, that said, I think that people are going to be so down on Philly, especially without A.J. Brown potentially. Got to assume he's going to be out at least this week, if not 2 weeks. We'll see what the injury report is on him. I think that Philadelphia is still live to draft. So I would say drafting Jalen Hurts at a discount, especially if you're going in the gauntlet where Jalen Hurts is at one point going top 5 in a lot of rooms. Like, I think that's still a valid thing to do. But your Philadelphia teams that you draft in the beginning of the gauntlet, if you have some teams that you drafted at high draft capital, even the mittens, I think it's a bit of a disaster. So Philadelphia, a very fluid spot for sure, but one where Philly, I expect them to move on because I don't think Tampa Bay's got the dogs, but with how Philly played against the Giants, like, they might be 1-2-3 Cancun. I know that's an expression I use a lot, but like it feels like their hearts just aren't in it this year. And maybe that's losing all the coaches, obviously on both sides of the ball. Shane Steichen looking great. Gannon's team also looking great. The Cardinals played harder than you would ever thought possible down the home stretch. Philly definitely lost a lot this year. And I don't know. I would play into the contrarian side of expecting them to do well, but I think it's, you know, the tape is tape. What happened is what happened. And I don't think they've shown any reason to have faith in them for sure. Peace and love to the squirters out there. Let's go Buffalo. Yeah, Buffalo landed in one of the best possible situations for themselves. And honestly, like a lot of ways too, where if the Chiefs advance, certainly wouldn't be great for them to see the Chiefs in round 2, but it's a beatable Chiefs team. So Buffalo, the irony of it all, where Buffalo, of course, a big disappointment last year, doesn't even make the title game. This year, I feel like their path to the title probably got a lot easier, and they really lucked into it, where again, like this is a team that could have been eliminated last night if Trevor Lawrence didn't shit the bed. Trevor Lawrence does shit the bed. The Jags as a team shit the bed more so, and Buffalo gets in. And now they have probably their best shot to make a Super Bowl, at least until they run into Baltimore. And I have to say, I don't think any of these teams in the AFC have the juice to beat Baltimore. Is how I feel about it right now. And it's possible one of them goes on like one of these destiny kind of runs, but I feel like Buffalo's in the best spot to make a Super Bowl they've been in. But I just don't like, they get to the AFC title game, you go against Baltimore. Like the defense is so good and opportunistic. The run game is so good. And Lamar, if the run game isn't there and he actually has to throw it, like we know Lamar has an incredible passing ceiling. I think it's a lot of things to go up against. And I would have a hard time doing it. Let's see, reading the chats. Cleveland has the best shot, but not enough firepower against Baltimore. Yeah, they have to win. They have to really ugly that one up, get pressure on Lamar, force Lamar into a really bad game, I would think, and then also have a lot of offensive production to keep Baltimore at bay. I think that's their best outcome. I think it's certainly, we're not saying it's a 0% chance, so let's actually open the Sumer Sports League table and see. Why does it never save? I've gone to Super Sports like 10 times on this computer, and it never just goes, yeah, that's what it is. Let's see. So we are now up to, see, obviously the buys have been clinched. 46% chance of winning the conference title for Baltimore. 22% chance of winning the Super Bowl for Baltimore. God, it feels even higher, but I guess that's only, I mean, it's double what the Chiefs have. So really it's still a big statistical jump between Baltimore and Kansas City. But at the same token, like the ELO ranking here, which I don't know what the exact way that they land on that for the Super Sports, basically ELO rankings for the most part are like, this team's ranked number 1, this team's ranked number 32. The one team beat the 32nd ranked team, so then you move them up accordingly. That's like basically the gist of how ELO works. I'm not sure what they have it as, but they do have the Chiefs ranked higher in ELO for some reason, which kind of surprises me. But I do think Baltimore, again, despite these numbers, like Baltimore's skill and just how good they are on both sides of the ball, if I were making a bet, I still think Baltimore is the best bet, but obviously you're going to be paying that price pretty deeply in playoff best ball. Can't believe Houston's playing a home playoff game. Crazy turnaround. I agree. I'm happy to see it. Like, again, kind of a bummer. Obviously, if that game were Anthony Richardson versus CJ Stroud, would have had a lot more juice, I think, would have been a lot more fun for me personally to watch. Gardner Minshew, I just felt like we kind of saw where that ceiling is with Gardner Minshew at QB, where if the defense were great, if the skill position players were great, then maybe that team could have made the playoffs and made a push. But it's not, and Gardner Minshew is enough to put it over the top. But Richardson versus Stroud would have been a lot more fun, I think. And we unfortunately didn't get that outcome. Fun to see Tennessee repay last year's favor and knock the other out. There you go. I mean, look, Mike Vrabel, I think he's still a shot to leave Tennessee. I think he should be a pretty big candidate for New England job if Bill Belichick leaves. But I would say that for Mike Vrabel, like, I don't know how you get rid of him after that game yesterday. Like, you need to bring in better offensive guys. You can't keep having tight end coaches run that offense and have it do nothing. But I think if they get a good offensive coordinator from somewhere and pair him with Vrabel, that's what Tennessee should do. But, we'll see what they do. Of course, it also felt like a swan song for the team overall. Derrick Henry gave a speech basically that sounded like he was either retiring or going somewhere else for sure. So it does feel like for Tennessee, definitely some things coming into play there. We can talk about in a moment because we have not talked about the offseason stuff yet. Rams in Detroit. I would think that this is one where I would favor Detroit personally. I am a big believer in Detroit. Of course, losing Sam Laporta, not great. They also have Brock Wright banged up right now. He's had a hip injury since week 15, I believe. So it should be James Mitchell out there at tight end, which is a pretty big downgrade. Mitchell's a big body dude, definitely not a skilled pass catcher, more of like a Jelani Woods type of tight end where he's just big. There's not a lot more that he has going for him besides that. I also still think he gets the one-to-one equivalent of volume as well that Laporta's been getting. So for Detroit, there's definitely some flaws. The good news for Detroit, though, is that like they're definitely going to key in on Amon-Ra St. Brown more. And we saw what happens where he has that ceiling, where he got the big play yesterday, was also heavily involved in that offense in a game where Detroit was playing for seeding, but it didn't really matter for them in any way because Dallas won. So for the most part, I would say for Detroit, like I'm still a big believer, even though they lose Laporta. Laporta, a big part of that offense. But those targets can go to Gibbs. They can go to Jameson Williams if he's back in. They can even go to Josh Reynolds or Khalif Raymond, assuming that Raymond is healthy. A lot of injuries for Detroit in that game, which was not the good part of what they did by going for it. But I believe in Detroit a lot. I think the Rams, I believe in a little bit less so. But really, whichever way you want to play this one, I personally would lean Detroit. Detroit, pretty big favorite in this one, or actually, no, not that big. -3 and a 51.5 total. Implied points for Detroit are pretty big in this game, though. They are at 27.3 implied points, which I think is the second highest on the week behind Dallas. Yes, that is the second highest behind Dallas on the week. So yeah, that's where Detroit comes in, where I think Detroit's still a very solid play. I know you people out there love the Rams, of course, in playoff basketball. We've seen the Rams go really aggressively. I would rather play in the Detroit side. The Rams, the Detroit right now in playoff basketball are priced at basically the same price point, and the pathway for Detroit is not going to be most likely, you would think. Actually, no. If Detroit wins, they can't possibly go to San Francisco. So Detroit Niners is the final four outcome I would play, along with Baltimore and Buffalo or Cleveland on their side. But I think feels pretty comfortable to me. A Niners-Detroit NFC title game. Detroit overcoming the Niners to win, I think, is a very live build. Very happy with the Detroit playoff basketball teams I built on stream here, but I personally would favor Detroit. I think people are going to go a little too heavy on the Rams because the Rams stack up nicely, have big fantasy football upsides. But Detroit's defense coming through and offensively having a little bit more juice than the Rams, I think is the outcome I believe in. Green Bay and Dallas. Green Bay, very feisty down the home stretch. Still don't think that Green Bay has the dogs compete with Dallas in this final game here. Green Bay, let me think about this here, because Green Bay going against Dallas. Dallas plays man at a very high rate, 40% man rate. All of their guys are less effective versus man for the most part, besides Aaron Jones. Aaron Jones, a 1.9 a yard per route run compared to 0.9 versus zone. But Jaden Reed, worse versus man than zone. Christian Watson, worse versus man than zone. Romeo Dobbs versus man than zone. Musgrave, better versus man, but he's banged up and really didn't get much work. Tucker Kraft getting most of that work yesterday, despite Musgrave coming off of IR. I don't think Green Bay has enough to beat Dallas here. And I especially think with that defense for Green Bay, where it looked okay yesterday for the most part, didn't do a lot to give up production to the Bears. I still think Green Bay's defense is weak on the year. 0.04 EPA per dropback allowed, 0.04 EPA per pass. They also don't play a lot of man, which is good news because CeeDee Lamb, I did not fade CeeDee Lamb yesterday because he had a matchup against Washington. Washington plays man at a high rate. CeeDee Lamb's splits and man versus zone are huge. 4.3 yards per route run versus man compared to 2.1 versus zone. So we're talking about him being half the player versus a zone team. So I think CeeDee Lamb, certainly valid, of course. He can get going in any matchup. But I think in this particular one versus Green Bay, I imagine they spread the ball around a little bit more. I think that Ferguson is a little bit more in play. A lot of tight end targets allowed by Green Bay's defense. I think Brandon Cook's also in play in this spot. Having the upside day to pull away from CeeDee Lamb, I think, is there because, again, it's just a really low man defense rate by Green Bay, and that's where CeeDee has excelled. Besides that, though, the point really, I think, of what I'm trying to make is like Dallas has a lot of weapons to go to. So even if CeeDee Lamb has like a mid game, has like a 15 to 20 fantasy point day, I think Dallas could win this one in a lot of different ways. And I just don't think Green Bay can. So I would favor Dallas. I think Dallas moves on, gets the home game in round 2. I believe then they would face Detroit. So Dallas, Detroit, round 2 would be my pick. And in Philadelphia, Tampa Bay, I have Philadelphia moving on, facing the Niners. And I think the Niners give them a not so kind welcoming and knock them out in the second round would be my guess for Philadelphia. Not excited about going to Kansas City, even though they are not last year's KC team. I assume Michael is a Dolphins fan. I mean, look, it's definitely going to be a home field advantage for KC. We know how loud Arrowhead can get. That said, this team is just playing it's like they're playing with house money after winning the Super Bowl last year. They have not been into any game. The defense even has gotten worse as the year has gone on. Of course, still can have better days on the home stretch here. But I just don't think the Chiefs are an actual good team. And I think the stretch down the back half of the year, I'd really lean on that a little bit more. Of course, any of these teams, you can play them getting hot. It's all relative to a playoff best ball draft where you're getting handed to you. But I don't know, like KC to me, Miami's a more fun option and also an option that I think is just more talented, especially on offense. So I'd favor Miami, but that's how it goes. What's the injury situation with Laporta? We talked about this earlier, but he has a hyperextended knee, so likely to miss at least 1 week. The reports I was seeing missing multiple weeks, but definitely I think with him, I think they still err on the side of safety because he's a very big part of their plans next year, obviously, and honestly for the future should be a big part of their plans. So I think Laporta, if I had to guess, at least misses the wild card. Maybe it's a shot to get in for the divisional round, but I don't think it's the highest outcome. A.J. Brown, I kind of think doesn't get in at all, would be my guess if Philadelphia plays 2 rounds. But this is me guessing, of course. We don't really know. Let's see. What's my favorite dog to win for the wild card round? Favorite underdog to win for the wild card round? I mean, there's a lot of minor dogs out there, so I feel like that's kind of the unsafe one. My favorite one to win would be Miami. I think the 3.5 point spread would probably be my pick. Yeah, I think that's it. My favorite long shot one would be Pittsburgh, just because I feel like Buffalo eking their way in, not really having to push themselves to the limit this past week, yesterday, not having to push themselves to the limit in the way they thought they would. I think it's not a great sign for Buffalo, where Buffalo's shown some good improvements overall. Again, controlling the offense a little bit more, limiting Josh Allen's risks, I think is a big part of what Joe Brady's done well. But I think they still have some weaknesses, and I think they're playing too close to the vest. And if Pittsburgh runs hot, gets one takeaway early that turns into a touchdown or something, I feel like Buffalo then is going to kind of lose what this new identity is. So I would say my long shot pick would be Pittsburgh because I think that's pretty big money, plus 390, obviously. But I think the easiest pick would be Miami. I like your thinking, Spags. I hope so, Michael. Look, I'm rooting for Miami too. I'm not like a Dolphins fan or anything, but they're a fun team, and the rest of these teams are not. So we don't have the Sunday DFS slates open, but we do have the Saturday one. Let's take a quick look at pricing for Saturday. Then Tua and Patrick Mahomes basically 1-to-1. Stroud and Flacco going to be coming up a little bit less. I would think that Flacco actually comes up pretty well in an optimizer play. And I'm actually going to not put this entry in because, frankly, we don't know enough about the week. And I've taken enough of beating on DFS this week. I'm not going to put a minus EV entry in. But I think that I would start this one with Joe Flacco personally, where going against Houston we saw definitely, I think, not a tight defense, not one that you're afraid of. Flacco dropping back so many times on the year. I would put in Flacco for me. But again, it all comes down to what the projections are going to be. But I like Flacco to $6,100 price tag, knowing that his ceiling is basically the same as Mahomes, the same as Tua Tagovailoa, same as CJ Stroud. No running QBs on that Saturday slate. I think bodes pretty well for that one. Running backs we could look at on the Saturday slate. We have Achane, we have Mostert. Of course, Mostert, we'd expect him to be back in that spot. Of course, I think he could have played this week if they really needed him to, but it seemed like Miami felt like they were better off letting these guys see if they can get healthy and hopefully have a better matchup for themselves or, better health outlay for themselves heading into the second round here, the wild card round. I guess, the first round really, but the second round of where the Dolphins are playing really from this past week. But Achane and Mostert, highest price guys in the slate. I would think that playing a KC lead build might be more interesting then because we are going to see a lot of salary going to Achane and Mostert. So maybe you play Pacheco instead. But I think that Achane and Mostert certainly going to be guys where they make sense in Miami builds where you have Miami winning. Also can make some amount of sense in builds where Miami loses because we do see more checkdowns going Mostert's way or Achane's way if Mostert can't go. Would still think that Mostert is safely the lead back in that game as well. But definitely, I would play Pacheco for a hand build here, but I think Mostert and Achane are going to have definitely appeal, especially if you think the Dolphins are going to win like I do. Will it be worse having to listen to Liam all next year if Buffalo wins the Super Bowl or stabbing yourself in the eye? I mean, I don't really, people can have whatever. I don't really care. I don't watch Liam that often. I watch the stream with Fareed, but shout out to Liam, of course, Liam Murphy, the BBM2 winner, BBM2 winner, who does a great job on stream. But yeah, I don't really care. I hope he does well. I hope his teams succeed. Let's see. What else can we look at running back here? Ford in play for sure in a build where Houston doesn't get there. Kareem Hunt in play, taking the red zone work away. Reasonable price tags for these guys. Again, I think people will flock to Achane and Mostert no matter what the game script that they're anticipating for Miami is. Again, I still think those guys make sense, but I think Ford kind of interesting, Hunt kind of interesting. And if you are going to play against Miami, I would say Pacheco, CEH probably not in play if Pacheco is going to be able to go, which we would assume he would be. Singletary may be interesting as well. Cheapest back besides Ford in here, but nothing too exciting here. I think at running back for the most part, you're just going to play over the projections, push you on, and different game scripts will push you on. And I think that's the way to do that. Wide receivers look at here. I don't even know why I'm putting guys in the lineup because I'm not building a lineup. Let's just keep going by positions here. Tyreek Hill, 8,700 for the Saturday slate. Tyreek, you would think, gets fed pretty well. Kansas City, a revenge game for him. This is his first time in Kansas City since he left there. So, look, revenge games don't matter. Tyreek, though, a guy that he has it on his notebook. He has it in something in the back of his head. And frankly, no matter what, like whether Waddle is in or not, they're going to feed Tyreek in the spot too. And I think too, like, schematically, the Chiefs done a lot of good things on the year. We could talk about their numbers briefly, but on the year, again, not including week 18 stats, minus 0.2 EPA per dropback, minus 0.22 EPA per pass, only minus 0.01 versus the run game. But I don't really care about that very much because I do think Tyreek's going to beat him no matter what. Chiefs play man at a higher rate than league average as well. 32% man rate is what they're playing in coverage. But Tyreek, 4.9 yards per route run versus man, 4.4 versus zone. It's not as big of a split as a guy like CeeDee Lamb. I just think Tyreek gets there no matter what. So to me, he'd be the play that I would really want the most. I'm sure ownership will also push there quite a bit, but Tyreek Hill, definitely the play people are going to go to pretty hard. Nico Collins after the big game, would think he does pick up a lot of ownership as well. The match versus Cleveland is going to be really tough for Nico to get going. I would think Cleveland defends deep balls well. They also defend everything out wide well. Negative 0.25 EPA per dropback. Cleveland's defense has given up on the year. Negative 0.3 EPA per pass. All bad news for CJ Stroud. They play man at 34% of the time, which is still really tough. A negative 0.3 EPA playing man, 0.24 EPA playing zone. Cleveland's defense just has no weaknesses, really, when these guys were all full go and healthy. So I think Nico picks up ownership. I don't think Nico's going to be a great play. I personally would play CJ Stroud, having to check down his way to things, having to hit Dalton Schultz more, having to hit, I think, Singletary more, maybe Woods if he's healthy as well. But I don't think it's a spot for Nico in this one. And I think him being priced number 2 on the slate, I personally don't love it. Love Noah Brown in the spot if he's healthy. Yeah, I think anybody who's a lever away from Nico Collins will be it because I just think people will say, oh, in this do or die game in week 18, they fed Nico Collins more than they have all year in terms of the air yards, in terms of the downfield targets, in terms of the overall volume. Them getting 9 targets in that game. I think he caught all of them. Yeah. So not his highest target outlay of the year, but his highest catch outlay of the year is what he had in that game. I think for Nico, I think he's a great player in terms of what he's done this year, but to me, it's really like, it's CJ Stroud dependent. This is what I talked about with the regular season best ball as well, where I thought CJ Stroud would add value to the receiving core. I unfortunately thought that meant like John Mechie and Tank Dell, of course, who got hurt. I did not think it would be Nico Collins taking this big of a leap, but I think it does speak to something to remind ourselves of next year. Like, I still don't think Nico's a great receiver. The results are the results. I think that's all CJ Stroud making him a great receiver. For me, if it's an adverse spot, if it's a really tough defensive matchup that they're going to take Nico away, I'm perfectly okay fading Nico because he's not like Tyreek Hill where he's going to get those 7 to 10 targets, those 7 to 15 targets maybe. I think for Nico, like there's game scripts where he gets 4 and then they just don't work out for him. And I think that's where Nico comes with some risk. Nico is a god. MVS is terrible. Nico's not a god, man. Nico had the results that CJ Stroud created for his guys in college. Like, I think that's Nico Collins was never this player in the NFL. Last year, the best case you could make for him was he was like fractional Brandon Cooks in that offense. And now this year, he's better than Keenan Allen in terms of the advanced metrics. Like, again, like it's all works out relative to like player in an offense is the picture that combines to what he is in terms of the advanced analytics and all that in terms of the results as well. But like, it's not Nico being good all of a sudden. If he were good, he would have been good the first 2 years he was in the league. Him, maybe making a leap year 2 to year 3 is you can take some credit, but it's all CJ Stroud. Like that's the biggest variable to change. So I think it's a terrible take to be honest. Nico's not a god. Amari Cooper, perfectly fine play. Of course, the last time we saw him play, he had the outlier day. Have to assume he'll be fully healthy to go versus Houston here. But frankly, I'd rather take him out of Nico 8 times out of 10 in this spot. I just think that, again, Houston going to have a tough time. I think if Houston does win this game, I don't think they win it through Nico personally, but that's me. Our guy Tyler here saying Nico, very good profiles, made strides to play, but very good QB and awesome fit and slow yak/Shanny offense. I think that's fair. But I think for Nico, yeah, like he's just, if you think it's all his talent making a leap, I think that's incorrect. CJ Stroud is a god. Yes. Any guy who's a great downfield thrower who creates value, tangible value in terms of the advanced analytics, like those guys make value for their supporting cast, for their teammates. Like we'd like to see Mahomes do this year. He didn't do it with his receivers, but that's sort of the thesis of what you have with CJ Stroud. And I think anything that misplaces that and puts it on Nico, I just don't think is correct. This doesn't matter to me at all. Nico playing at home, that's not a split that matters. Rashee Rice, great to be indoors in Houston, I guess is the one thing, but I don't know. You guys, if you want to play Nico, more power to you. I'm not going to talk you out of it if you've heard these things and you continue to want to stump for him and cape for him in the chat. Rashee Rice, very valid play as well. Of course, only outside receiver that's been healthy and been trusted over down the home stretch here. I guess Justin Watson, you can make a case for, but definitely for Rashee Rice in play in a spot versus Miami where the Chiefs are going to have to put up points and want to put up points to get ahead of any potential Miami damage that they can do. But I think with this spot, I would say Rashee Rice, fine play. Would rather have him over Nico. I think I'd prefer Amari Cooper out of this group. That's neither here nor there. Waddle, okay play if we're not playing Tyreek Hill. Got to assume Kansas City will do everything they can. Use the knowledge they have to stop Tyreek Hill. I just don't think they can. But Waddle, aggressive price tag for him coming off the injury, but still one that makes sense. Noah Brown, 5,100. Elijah Moore, cheaper. Of course, Elijah Moore we'd expect will be healthy and able to go. Was active. I don't think he played any snaps from what I saw. Watching Jeff Driscoll not play well at QB yesterday. But for Elijah Moore, obviously, I think the pivot points at Amari Cooper, that works as well. What should Bears do with first pick? I think they should keep Fields personally. I think the team is built for an established QB. And even if Caleb Williams comes in and is good, even if Drake May comes in as good, even if my boy Jaden Daniels comes in and is good, I think there's still a learning curve to hit, which Fields is not going to have to hit. And then you have the same issue too with the coaching staff, where the coaching staff finally has figured out Fields knows what he can do and seemingly is playing into it a little bit more, even though obviously didn't get the results yesterday in a way I'm sure they would have liked. I would say for them, I know it's tough to pay the QB. Fields is young enough and has shown enough to me that I would pay him, and I wouldn't want to rebuild because you have DJ Moore there. You have Sweat, who you acquired at midseason. Like, you've given up all the things that a rebuilding team would have to make a good outlay. And yeah, they could get draft capital back by trading the pick and do it that way. But I would keep Fields, try to build around him, try to add to the defense around him, maybe get him one more playmaker at wide receiver. That's how I had to do it, but I get it. Bears got to trade down, get 2 OT. I think that's another way to do it. I think keeping Fields is the move, though. I don't want to pay that big salary to Fields, but it would be much worse to see him go somewhere else and have the outcome that they wanted to have for him as they've been grooming him in the last few years. And I think, too, again, it's just there is a learning curve. Like, we're seeing Stroud come in and be good. We saw Anthony Richardson come in and be good. We've seen other guys like Brock Purdy come in and be good. But I think there's a risk profile to all of that. And again, you could have like Bryce Young, who's the number 1 pick, and that goes incredibly poorly. I don't think Caleb Williams is that guy. Drake May, maybe that guy in a bad offense. But I think I would still keep Fields and pay him and just try to build around him. And if it tanks, then what are you going to do? Other receivers here down the depth chart. Bell has probably earned himself a little bit of a role, but with Elijah Moore being healthy, probably not going to be a good thing that benefits Moore moving forward. Tillman going to be another outside receiver getting routes, but nobody too interesting down here. Kadarius Toney being back in, I think an interesting low-owned play. Of course, I'm in the bag for Kadarius Toney and have been stupidly throughout the course of the offseason and this year. But Toney getting scheme touchdowns heading into the playoffs, like he's one of those guys that can have a run. Also, have no issue with Kadarius Toney in playoff best ball if you do think KC is going to make a go and actually get to the AFC title game. Tight ends, probably a bad tight end slate. Travis Kelce, though, is going to be there, 6,100. Njoku, 5,600. Make the case how these guys have played lately that Njoku, 5,600, could carry a little bit further than Kelce at 61. But we have Njoku here, 8 targets, 9 targets, 14. Kelce last month, 4, 7, 7, 10. Why is he not getting these targets? I don't know. Is the time off going to benefit him? I don't know. I think with Kelce, he'll be a chalk play in the spot, people trying to get there. If he were a lower owned play, I'd be more willing to go to Kelce just because you are hoping you capture what he hasn't been doing all year. Didn't even hit 1,000 yards this year because he didn't go in week 18. And even if he did go in week 18, hitting 1,000 yards with a few more games, even though he was injured for a couple. I think Kelce this year is just not the same guy. But again, if it's close in ownership, if people are going to play Njoku more, I think Kelce becomes a little bit more appealing. But for the most part, I would say that Kelce and Njoku, very similar plays heading into this spot in the wild card. And then defenses, here's your 4 defenses for Saturday. Browns, Texans, Chiefs, Dolphins. I would favor Dolphins here because I think them getting a takeaway from Mahomes and how he's played, probably the most appealing, but any of these guys are fine. And of course, I don't give a shit about defense anyway. Hope Miami versus KC is on streaming and not TV. Why do you want it to be on streaming and not TV? I don't know how that goes. I am a brave take by me coming up, though. I think we are going to cancel Xfinity and move over to YouTube TV because Fios' 2 gig internet is now like cheaper than everything we have, and we only have 1 gig with Xfinity. So that's my big update here. What else do we have to hit on here? I guess the coach firings are one other thing. Let's go to ESPN real fast. Ron Rivera out. I think very good news there. I didn't see the news about Bieniemy. I don't know if you guys have. I don't care about these clips. Yeah, I've not seen anything about Eric Bieniemy because I don't think Bieniemy will get promoted in this spot, but I don't know if he got fired either. They might be trying to retain him as OC and then bring in a coach above him. But that's one to watch for the Commanders job. Commanders, though, obviously going to be... Actually, let's go up to the NFL draft picks, NFL draft order. This is an important thing, I think, to close out Week 18 as well. Yeah, nothing on Bieniemy yet. Okay, there we go. Rivera and Belichick are fossils. Yes, but I think Belichick gets another shot. I don't think Rivera does. And Xfinity is so bad. I don't think it's so bad. I've had no issues with it, but it's just expensive. Like our bill this month was like fucking $280 for Xfinity, which like we have, a nice package with it. We have a nice package. But yes, besides that, like it's definitely not worth it. So that's where I am with Xfinity. And it's going to finally make me a cord cutter as I'm just fucking bleeding us to death. Top 18 picks. Bears number 1, Commanders number 2. So I mentioned on my rookie QB preview, of course, I'll be doing wide receivers this week as well. So keep your eyes peeled here. Subscribe down below. Make sure you get my rookie takes, which made people a lot of money last year, including a very seasoned basketball player. So hang out with us for that. Commanders, I think, are a Drake May team. In a perfect world, if they bring in a good coach, a Jaden Daniels team. And I think that would be one that'd be the most interesting. Jaden Daniels with McLaurin, with maybe can rehab Jahan Dotson, with the running backs there who I think showed some juice this year. Robinson showed some juice. Gibson probably on the way out. Chris Rodriguez looked okay for the one game he actually had some opportunity. I think the Commanders would be very well served to go to Jaden Daniels, but if they don't hire a good coach, I'd rather see them take the bullet on Drake May and I think contribute to Drake May's downfall. We did see the Commanders, I think, hired Bob Myers and somebody else who is a luminary front office guy to make their hire for the next coach. So we'll see what they do, but I definitely think that for Washington, like they're in a really fragile spot where they can really fuck this up. I think if they take Drake May and hire a bad coach, or they can really crush it by hiring a good coach or bringing in Jaden Daniels. We'll see what they do. Bears, I think the Bears trade the pick personally. I think Justin Fields showed enough, and I think, frankly, Eberflus and Ryan Poles, I assume, will be returning despite being one of the worst GMs who keeps kind of trotting it out back out there. I would say for the Bears, I think they trade the pick. Who trades up? I don't know. Whoever's going to want to have the biggest haul for Caleb Williams, I just don't know who that would even be at this point. I don't think the Patriots trading up would be a move. And it wouldn't shock me either, knowing the Patriots and how they do, for them to not take a QB and then take a defensive guy, take an offensive guy. I don't think they would take Marvin Harrison either. I think they would take like a tackle, or it's just the Patriots. I think even though they lose Bill Belichick, I just don't know that they have a dramatic overall to their approach. We will see. But if I were doing betting market stuff right now, which I assume there isn't a lot for the NFL draft, I think Patriots not going QB would be one thing I would try to look at. Big Penix, Penix Jr., big Penix fan. Yes. Penix, I would say the one thing for him, if you want to really scare yourself off Penix, look up his age and look up his knee injury history, and then you could maybe find your way to a logical Penix take. But there are not going to be a lot of logical Penix takes. If he wins that title tonight on the national championship game, I think that people are going to be really illogical for Penix, and I think he's an okay player. But watch my rookie QB preview if you want to know more about how I saw that. Cardinals at the 4th spot. Again, looks like they're keeping Kyler Murray. So they're probably a team that is alive to take Harrison, which would be a tremendous move for them. The upgrade from a Michael Wilson, Marquise Brown as your number 1 wide receiver to Marvin Harrison would be, I don't even know, a 2x leap, a 3x leap, a 4x leap. Harrison is a god. Like Harrison is really, we want to talk about Nico Collins. If Marvin Harrison were, and again, I know these guys played at Ohio State together, he and CJ Stroud. If Marvin Harrison were playing the Nico Collins role, he would have 2,000 yards his first year. Like that's how I feel about Marvin Harrison. So wherever he goes, I'm intrigued by it. The Cardinals, of course, showed enough life. Not an exciting offense, I don't think. We didn't really do a whole lot in the past games to make me feel like, oh, this is a really fun offense that we could target for years. But I think they did show enough confidence across the board that for them having the 4 pick, I think they do something valuable with it. And unfortunately, it might be Marvin Harrison. Patriots could be 0-17 next year without Belichick. I think you undersell how bad this offense has been and how terrible their drafting has been of skill position guys for years. Like, I think even if they didn't take a QB or a wide receiver in the first round, just them getting better or having a shot at being better or even taking more volume in the second round, the third round, the fourth round, I think it's going to be a big improvement for them. So I disagree with that. I don't think they'll be 0-17. But, you know, maybe it just depends who they hire. If they hire Mike Vrabel, like I think they actually are probably getting it closer to like being a 7-10 team, 8-9 team their first year. But if they hire, you know, some young upstart there and like a guy who actually sees the offense, like if they were to hire a Kellen Moore type, or at least how we feel about Kellen Moore, Brian Johnson type or somebody like that, or Ben Johnson, excuse me, not Brian Johnson. They don't want to hire the Eagles offensive coordinator. They want to hire the Lions one. If they were to hire a guy like that, I think you see things move a lot faster, but the defense will never be as good. Like that's the one thing you can say about Belichick. Obviously, Breece Hall carved him up yesterday. That Patriots defense kept showing up. And I think that's the thing for the Patriots. It's going to be not a sure thing moving forward. Chargers in the 5 hole, would think they are live for a wide receiver. Have seen Malik Neighbors being a guy that's been sort of mocked there by some people. Does seem like they're not likely to have a Marvin Harrison fall to them, but certainly a way to clean up the Quentin Johnston pick would be to take another receiver, and then maybe you take some pressure off Quentin Johnston. Maybe he can grow, but Quentin Johnston, one thing he has going for him, he didn't hit I believe the 600 receiving yard threshold, which is one that's had a lot of bad success or a lot of bad opportunity for receivers that did hit under 600 yards in their rookie year in terms of developing into a viable pro. So the Chargers may want to redo a wide receiver, but how they go, I think will depend on who the coach they hires is. And that defense is also so bad this year that they might just want a pass rusher. Pats roster is straight garbage, especially offensively. It doesn't matter who their coach was. Not a chance they're an 8-9 team. I mean, and I don't know. I don't agree with that. I think that's one of those things that people think in terms of roster talent. It's all about how it comes together. And again, you know, to go back to the advanced analytic days at Football Outsiders and also their parent company, Edge Sports, like a lot of what the advanced models do, including some of the biggest ones that are used out there by betting syndicates, by teams as well, is you're rolling in the entire offense together with like the individual players. You're not necessarily downgrading individual players, but you're also then accounting for the coach and how aggressive the coach is, how the coach gets the most out of his team year after year. And Belichick, for whatever it's worth, like it doesn't matter the contract money that he has on defense, doesn't matter the draft capital he has on defense. That defense every year is one that's like a top performer. So I think you're viewing that the wrong way personally, but you can view it however you want. Giants at number 6, probably not live to take a QB given the contract they have for Daniel Jones this year. I think need a running back. Saquon obviously had the good game this week, but that was largely volume based. Was used pretty creatively in that game though, so maybe there's a shot. But I think in this spot too, yeah, there we go. You folks said the same thing about Houston. That's Tyler, a good point here. I know Tyler's in the bag for Houston too, but like you guys kind of forget sometimes like things that we just saw this year. And I do too, of course, talking about it. But like, yeah, it really is. It's coaching, it's scheme, it's a million things that aren't just, oh, they don't have enough talent. And I think that's also kind of a thing that people say is cover for guys like Belichick. Like, oh, you didn't have enough talent. Okay, well, who is the one who's stocking the cupboard over the last few years? It's Belichick who's making the calls in concert with that front office. But yeah, any team can turn around. Like it's just a matter of what you have in the spots and then how you're using them to have that upside. But I don't know. Titans at number 7. Would think that they're not going to take a QB. I think they got enough out of Levis to at least give him a year two, but would imagine that's more of a defensive team. If they're smart, could also take a wide receiver as well. If one that's one of the good ones that falls to him. Of course, we'll talk more about that later in the week to see if there are anybody I think could be worth a top 10 besides Harrison and maybe Neighbors. But definitely with the Titans live for something overhauly here. But I think to them, probably the best outcome is continuing to play Titans ball. Playing that grit and grind kind of ball for Tennessee has worked well. I think that I would lean into that if I were them and bring Vrabel back as well. But a new offensive coordinator for Tennessee is what I would really advocate for. But I don't know if they ever will overhaul the offense if Vrabel's there. So kind of a yin-yang push-pull kind of thing there. 50-50 Vrabel's back. Yeah. I mean, I think what Schefter kind of hinted at during the ESPN segment yesterday was that Vrabel's going to be curious about the New England job. And I think New England will be curious about him. And if New England brings Vrabel in there, I think you probably see a very similar Patriots team to what we've seen, where the offense, I don't expect to make a leap under Vrabel. The defense, I would say, probably gets, still very solid year after year, even though there's going to be more flaws. We saw with Tennessee this year, of course, how they couldn't defend the pass, an obvious flaw that Belichick teams sometimes don't have. But we'll see, obviously, a lot of things that can move around there. Bailey Zappi, Mac Jones is never it. I think that's fair. I think there's a world where Mac could have been a Brock Purdy style QB for an offense that's good, but that's, we'll never know now, or at least most likely we won't know. Bears, another pick here. Man, what the Bears do is going to be the biggest thing to know, for the biggest domino for the NFL draft stuff, just because having 2 top 10 picks, having different ways you can go with it. They could also, again, trade down here and pick up another pick from somebody else, maybe another first rounder. The Bears, to me, I know people want to do the full rebuild. I just don't think you do that if you just traded for DJ Moore and for Montez Sweat. I would be really shocked if they did, but we'll see. If there are betting markets out there for it, I haven't looked. And in Pennsylvania, we don't get a lot of these exotic props. I would say making a bet on Field stays, Bears don't take a QB. I think those are bets that I would try to take if you could find them in whatever betting markets are out there. Of course, there's always weird betting markets. I don't know what exists, what doesn't. You guys will know better than I did. Bidnell's and I short clip getting 1K views on a tiny channel overnight. There you go. Hey, can't blame it. All right. Anything else to note here? What else have we not touched on? I guess the one thing I could show you guys real fast, betting markets with probably. Let me pull that up quickly here. We'll just do it. It's not going to look as pretty as my usual setup here, but let's do that. Stop screen, present this one. Of course, probably what we do is we track the data from the winningest sportsbooks around the world to find the true probabilities. And it's not going to look as good as the usual version I do on the Probably YouTube streams. I already did my NBA best bets video today if you want to check that out for NBA. But let's go over to the NFL game by game here. And actually, you guys can do this for yourself as well at probably.com if you want to do it for free. I think it's actually one of the more powerful tools that, frankly, I don't do a good enough job promoting. But in terms of the info gathering that you can have for this stuff, looking at this tool is going to be an important one. Let me just get NFL in here because I did not filter by football. But here are games for this week coming up and the most probable markets. We'll do that later in the week, Charles, not today. Cowboys money line, 75% chance of winning. Cowboys first quarter money line, 67% chance. Over 22.5 in the first half. So we are seeing some overs here, skewing that way for Dallas and Green Bay. So this game could be a shootout. So that's what the early market reads would be from this one. So I think Dallas Green Bay shootout definitely would make Green Bay a little bit more live to win that game. If they're getting success against Dallas's defense, that I would be worried about. Again, when we talk about the matchup stuff, this is a pretty good one to see, I think, for the potential of high scoring in this spot. Yeah, a lot of alternate totals as well over the market total. So I think Dallas and Green Bay right away looks like a pretty decent shootout candidate. Of course, props not in for the markets yet. They probably will be in the back half of the week. I'm outside of Pennsylvania, or outside of Philadelphia, excuse me, but not willingly. Texans versus Browns. Let's see what the markets have for this one. Oh, now we're getting all of them. Excuse me. I scrolled down too far. Over 18.5 is the most probable one right now. Browns plus 1.5, second most probable. Over 19 in the first half, 62% chance. Texans plus 5. So we are looking at potential one-score game, which I think is a positive for Houston. Houston plus 3.5 in the first half, another one here. So all the top markets, again, pointing towards a competitive game here, according to the market data. Over 18.5 showing some amount of scoring in the first half, though not necessarily a lot. Could be a 10-10 game, and that would be an over, but not necessarily a good one. But I think this one's kind of interesting. Chiefs versus Dolphins, most probable markets. Chiefs plus 0.5 in the first half, so expecting a competitive first half in that one. So that's one that probably benefits the Chiefs if it is a slog. If it were a boat race game, I think that benefits Miami. Under 24.5 in the first half, so looking towards an under in that one, 64% probability. Under 24.5. Chiefs win at a 63% probability. Chiefs money line first half, 61% probability. So the markets do think the Chiefs win this one in kind of an ugly game, it looks like. So I would say this is not a great cosign for the Dolphins. Also getting an under here on the market total. Yeah, I would say from a first look here, of course, it's early. The markets will move around. The prices will move around over the course of a week. But I think this is not a great look for what I would like to see, which is Miami advancing in that game. Bucks versus Philly, of course, the Monday nighter coming up. Under 47.5 is a 60% probability. Eagles plus 1, 60%. So they are saying here that there's an outcome potentially that the Eagles blow the game, but still keep it within range. So that's not an expectation necessarily of the Bucks pulling ahead. We also have a hedge on the market line for the Bucks. Bucks plus 5.5 at a 60% probability. Then the Eagles win 59% and Bucks plus 5. So we're seeing hedges on both sides of the market spread with Eagles plus 1 and Bucks plus 5.5, Bucks plus 5. But I think these lines probably do seem like they are skewing more towards the Eagles. We're not. What's the market total here? Philadelphia, the market total is at 44, excuse me. So saying a potential shootout where the game is within one score and a little bit more of a hedge on the Bucks. But again, this game looks like it actually is going to have some scoring. So another one with Philadelphia and Tampa Bay that I think the markets seem a little bit more favorable on, not being a defensively minded matchup. Bills versus Steelers. Let's see what this one has. Bucks money line. I don't know what the exact odds were. The money line, though, this is going to be similar to our numbers. Minus 140, plus 120 for the Bucks. Back to probably. Bills money line, 80% chance of winning. That is really high for a wild card round. So the Bills win, if it doesn't happen, would be a tremendous upset. Obviously, it is a plus 10 spread for Pittsburgh in that spot, but the Bills win seems like it's very likely. Bills first half money line as well. Whenever you see that these two are the most probable events in a game, it does expect the markets mean that the team is going to dominate the game. So you have the Bills money line, Bills first half money line, top two here with 80% and 72% probabilities respectively. Under 21 in the first half means not a lot of scoring. So an uglier game could favor Pittsburgh a little bit, but instead I would think this just means that Buffalo wins ugly and Pittsburgh doesn't put up a lot of points. Steelers plus 7.5 in the first half. Means that they are expecting the Steelers potentially go down big early as well. That's not great. Under 20.5 in the first half. So for Bills, Pittsburgh, I would expect an ugly game, one that does play a little bit more closer to Steelers' style of play, but does feature the Bills winning that game, which would not be a surprise, of course. And we didn't look at Detroit, right? That's the one that we didn't look at. Where did that go? There we go. Detroit versus Rams. Lions plus 0.5 in the first half, over 22.5 in the first half as well. Lions plus 1. So we're seeing some hedging against the Lions here. The Lions still have a 63% win probability to win this one with the Lions money line. Lions minus 1, 62%. Lions minus 1. Okay, we have a duplicate of that bet. First half money line, 61%. So this feels like a field goal game. So, oof. This worries me for playoff best ball because, like, if this game is a competitive one that has a lot of scoring, we could see teams advance with Rams with Rams and Lions even. And then obviously one of those teams is going to get knocked down the wild card round. So I don't know how you address that when you're drafting playoff best ball teams, but something to be mindful of, I guess, if you are in rooms where you see people kind of picking off wild card players as one-offs. Kind of think that Dallas, Green Bay, and Detroit Rams are two games where you could see like the game shootout and drive people to advance, even though they might not have enough players then to actually make a Super Bowl. But Rams Detroit feels like a very fertile game based off these markets. And Green Bay Dallas also felt like a very fertile game based off these markets. And that could definitely throw things off. Like last year we had DK Metcalf and the Jags helped advance a lot of wild card teams. And then they didn't get further than the second round because they weren't teams built to make the title game really. I think that's something we could see again this year. So if I were to warn you against it, I think that Rams, Detroit, Green Bay, Dallas, and then I guess Philadelphia and Tampa Bay, 3 games that feel like all the NFC games feel like ones that could have a little more points scored and could give you some weird outcomes that result in more guys making a lineup than could be. Thank you. Good micro and macro thoughts. All I can ask here. So we'll go with that as a closer here. Love how people just dismiss the Steelers and the Bills haven't been playing good either. I said earlier that I thought the Steelers could win that game, but betting markets don't support that. And again, this isn't just like your DraftKings betting market. We roll in the ones that like have people placing $1,000 uncapped bets, tens of thousands of dollars uncapped bets. That's why our data is so strong. It probably so. This is like a read from the biggest betting markets. And I would say the one caveat would be that for the most part, favorites get bet earlier in the week. Underdogs get bet later in the week by sharp markets because of the fact that because basically like the public likes to bet favorites and they bet them up throughout the course of a week. The public doesn't like to bet underdogs. So underdog lines tend to get better by the end of the week. So that's the one thing you could say is a caveat to the data I just showed you guys. But I still would say that for the most part, this data is going to be the best read you have on that stuff. Shout out Chad here. Morty Spags want to drop in and say hi. Love the preview. Shouts to Chad here. Shouts to all the guys here. A lot of great minds in the chat. A lot of great minds doing things in the world. And Chad is one of them. So shout out to him. And let's close it out here now, guys, with some quick whoring. Please do subscribe down below. Please hit the like button. Please leave a comment if you're watching after the fact. Of course, hope this video helped out. We'll be talking more about playoff basketball throughout this week. We'll also be talking about rookie wide receivers this week, which is going to be a big one. Last year, we'll say that we got some things right at rookie wide receiver. Even some of the guys that bubbled up late, guys that ended up having a little bit of value, like Cedric Tillman, Tank Dell. We talked about them on the video. I don't know why I put Cedric Tillman before Tank Dell in terms of promoting, but did talk about Tank Dell as a guy that could potentially break out. So guy that we got wrong last year was Quentin Johnson. So how do we learn from that? We'll find out more as we dig into that this week. But guys, also thank you to the Squirt Squad here. Lots of members. If you want to support the show, hit that join button down below. $4.99 a month gets you the data updates for me every week. That's all my rookie data as well. Lots of things coming up here. Some premium content coming up in the channel too. So hit that join button down below to save yourself any money. You're not saving yourself any money. You're spending money, but you are supporting the show, supporting me, continuing to do this. So please hit that join button down below. God, I'm fucking stammering down the home stretch here. And check out probably, again, what I just showed you guys on screen. You can actually look at that for free, but it's get plus EV bets and get them sorted by most profitable. Guys like Jason have paid for that 1 year. Jason was kind enough to buy a year of probably membership. He's paid for that now, I think 4 or 5 times over, at least based on the results that I know. So that's how it looks like at Probably. Again, this is what our data does for you. So check it out at probably.com/subscribe. So if you're trying to build a bankroll to go attack best ball season coming up, I think winning sports bets is going to be the way to do it. So check it out at probably.com and save 50% with promo code SPLASH on there. And I'll be back yammering my way through something tomorrow. I don't know what we're going to do. Probably playoff best ball tomorrow. Might do a few streams of playoff best ball this week. DraftKings is live as well with their playoff best ball, so that could be what we do as well. But stay tuned here. We'll be doing 5 days a week of streams at 11 a.m., so we'll figure it out as we go. Appreciate all you guys being with me. Follow me at Chris Spags. Follow the show at Splash Play Pod. Smash the like button before you go. I'll see you guys soon. Enjoy your gays and enjoy your gays. Yes, enjoy your fucking kill me. Enjoy your gays and your days, and good luck. Bye.